Okay. Hello, Ward 2 residents. It's Howard Garrett, the chair of the Ward 2 Democrats. We're here today with another conversation with DC at-large Councilmember candidate Kevin Chavous. Kevin, we're so excited to have you with us today. Thank you for taking out the time to speaking with us in regards to Ward 2 priorities and concerns. We also want to say thank you for wanting to run for office. We know how heavy that is to want to be a public servant. So we appreciate your commitment in serving DC residents in this upcoming election cycle. I'll go ahead and introduce Ben, then we'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself, and then we'll follow by the question.
All right. Thank you. Sounds good.
And my name is Ben Dalley. I am a Ward 2 resident, not chairman, excuse me. I am the Advisory Neighborhood Commission 2F04 ANC member, born and raised in Ward 2, and proud to be the communications chair for the Ward 2 Democrats. I'm excited to be here with Kevin Chavous, another DC born and raised guy who's running for at-large council member. Kevin, we want to take a moment to introduce yourself to Ward 2 voters.
Yes, sure. Well, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Howard. Thank you to the whole Ward 2 Democrats Executive Committee. I love this concept of getting people to engage in this way to give the community, especially Ward 2, the chance to hear from all of us without 9 people up there getting 30 or 45 seconds to talk about some of these issues. So this is great. So as you all said, I am Kevin Chavous. I'm an attorney that has been in DC my entire life. Really, I've done some traveling, but have primarily, well, pretty much all lived in DC. And for me, I grew up in a household where public service was part of everyday life. My name is familiar to some people who've been around in DC because my dad was on the city council and he has the same name. I have a different middle name, so I'm not a junior, but he's also Kevin Chavous as well. He represented Ward 7 back in the early 90s. And I still live in Ward 7 now with my wife and 2 kids. So some of my earliest memories are tied to his public service. My mom is actually born and raised in DC, and she grew up in Ward 7 as well, went to Anacostia, went to Sousa Middle School. So having those two as parents, they're both attorneys as well. They met in law school. I couldn't get away from policy discussions, political discussions, local, national, all of it. And that just sort of shaped who I am today. So I started out really with a strong interest in housing, which I still have. But when I was in college at Howard University, I worked for most of the time at college for about 3 years at Housing Counseling Services, which still exists today. And if you've done HPAP, the Home Purchase Assistance Program, or know anyone who's done that, most of them probably dealt with housing counseling services in some way. I worked with them primarily on their efforts to organize tenants, to inform them of their TOPA rights. And because you have to have a tenant association first before you can exercise TOPA rights. And I'll never forget when I was younger, I got into housing or started to feel this connection, this passion for housing when there was this fire when I was about 9 years old. My dad was in office and there was a fire, I think it was around Thanksgiving, at the Eastgate Housing Complex, which is over by Benning Road, not far from Fletcher Johnson, where you probably heard about the Fletcher Johnson development. It's got a lot of attention recently. But there was this fire late at night and he took me with him. I think he wanted me to see how people live and how devastating things like that can be. And I'll just never forget this older woman. As we pulled up, you could see the smoke still billowing from the complex, even though the flames were mostly extinguished by then. But I'll just never forget, as we walked up, the firefighters started talking to my dad, and there was this woman who was trying to drag this trash bag out of the front door. And basically everything that she had was in that trash bag, everything she was able to save. She was in one of the buildings that was hit the worst by the fire. And I tried to help her pull the bag out, and it was a little too heavy for me. And other people came to help. But I just remember it was cold and the pain and anguish on her face, and just really wondering, like, wow, this is unacceptable. And where is she going to go? What's going to happen? So that kind of got me. I just will never forget that. It made me want to fix that. No one should have to live in a house or in any building that has just persistent code violations where the landlord's unresponsive. And sadly, we still see that today. So I did the housing work. I went on to law school and worked at AARP, legal counsel for the elderly. So in that role, I helped some homeowners that were affected by reverse mortgages, and I was proud of that work. Then I started my own practice for several years where I did some landlord tenant, some probate, some personal injury, a little bit of everything. Then I worked for a firm called Moray Global, consulting firm, where I helped. That was a little more of a white collar work, where I helped organize teams of attorneys that were working on big government investigations. A lot of it was financial based. Wasn't my favorite job. And then while I did that, I was president of DC Young Democrats and on the state committee. So I continued to remain involved in that way through public service. I was on the UPO board, United Planning Organization. And then most recently, I served as the committee director for Councilmember Anita Bonds, director of the Committee of Executive Administration and Labor. So getting back to really what my passion is, which is really public service, especially to DC. And I was in that role until January when I resigned in order to unhatch myself so that I could run for her seat. Once I realized she wasn't going to run, I decided to go ahead and jump in, because obviously I love DC tremendously, but as a parent now, well, with two kids, and when I think about how DC has changed, and Ben, you can speak to this too. So many of my friends and cousins, people I grew up with, they don't live in DC. And it's not just the same old story of people who are struggling to make a life. These are people who have good jobs. And they just made the decision, well, I don't want to live in DC. We'd rather live in the suburbs. And that hurts my heart, but also is not a good trend for the city. And it takes away from what makes DC great, which is our diversity and the fact that we attract so many different people to live here. So I want to make sure the city is a place where my kids and their friends that they're in school with will be able to live in, and that will be a diverse, vibrant city for everyone. So that's a little bit more about me and why I'm running. And it's been great getting around and meeting people. Been enjoying it.
I love that. And one, I'm envious of being able to run around the city, meeting people, shaking hands, attending events
Well,
full
be careful
time.
what you wish for. You can do it too. You
I
know.
said envy. I said envy. I didn't say. And thank you for telling us about your history. I learned a lot there. Can you help translate that into why you're the perfect person to be our next at-large committee person? What about your
Council member.
background? What
Or
about your
council member, yeah.
background? What did I say?
Well,
Mayor?
Or you said a
nice.
committee
Committee
person.
person.
You got
Apologize.
that. See, that's the
Let
Ward
me,
2 Democrat hat. That's
yeah.
that's
Let me
good.
ask that question again. So thank you for telling us about your background. Can you translate that for Ward 2 voters as to why your
Yes.
background, your experience makes you the perfect person to be our next at-large council member?
Yes. And I wouldn't say perfect. I think that there are a lot of good candidates running, but I think what sets me apart from the other candidates, and it is a very crowded race, I believe 9 people total that are running. At-large council members is a unique role because you're representing the whole city. And one thing I've seen in this campaign is so many people, and these are people who are long-term DC residents, may not even know really what at-large does. They like, are you on the ballot for everyone, or is it just here? Or, so I think the most important thing is that we need at-large members um, who have strong connections with the community and also are able to relate to the history of DC. I think that's very important. This is a big election for us, and we're going to have a new mayor, a new delegate to Congress, potentially 5, maybe even 6 new council members when it's all said and done in the next 12 months, depending on special elections that may be needed. And that means we're going to have a lot of new people who really may be new to legislation, new to local government, or especially making laws and dealing with the council and dealing with the executive in that way. And frankly, I believe I'm the most prepared at this time to jump in and contribute right away, because I do have 4 years of experience on the council. I do have the years of legal training. I believe I'm the only attorney in the race, but I also have the political seasoning. it is a political position. So my work with the Democratic State Committee, I mean, you all are Ward 2 Dems, so you know how it can be trying to get people on the same page and balance different positions and ideas. So I've had to do that through my work with the Democratic Party mainly and other community organizations. So I believe that my training and my background, which is unique to me, I think, compared to others in the field, makes me the best candidate at this time, because I don't need the same level of on-the-job training to get started right away in January 2027. And I believe that's more important now than even in previous years, because we have so much change that will be taking place. And it's exciting, but we want prepared leadership to take some of these seats. And I believe I'm most prepared to do that.
Great. Thank you for that. Let's go ahead and get into the questions.
Okay.
First question is going to be centered around public safety, which is a highly thought about concern with DC residents. So the question is, what strategies would you pursue to improve public safety and community well-being in Ward 2?
Well, the first thing we have to do is support MPD as far as their staffing needs. I know that we're very short of the number of officers that MPD has requested. I do believe we should aspire to get to that number. I believe it's 3,000, they say, or maybe 4,000. But we're short. And what that does is it makes us have to spend so much in overtime for police. Every year, at least when I was on the council, and I know before that, or when I worked at the council, we spend so much in unplanned overtime. And it really puts a damper on the budget. Then we have to move money around from other agencies and other parts of the government to cover these overtime costs. Now, we know that the overtime costs are coming because we're short staffed, but we don't know how much. And we know our police in DC are pulled in so many different directions because they respond to protests and they work on federal related issues as well. So I definitely believe we need to recruit more officers, but it's tough because a lot of people don't want to be police officers. I mean, there's a stigma, I think, for some people in our community because there's a justified lack of trust between MPD and the community, and recent events haven't helped that. I mean, the Trump takeover of DC and activating the National Guard, which is total waste of money. We don't need it, but to the community, they see National Guard, they see police. A lot of people look at them as different sides of the same coin. So we've got to rebuild the trust with MPD. But so that's one thing, supporting, trying to recruit so that we're not dependent on spending so much in overtime. But we also have to invest in mental health services. A police officer does not need to respond to every situation. In fact, most situations could be solved by other intervention, right? Connecting people with services they need, with counseling, even infirmary services. So to make sure that people who are going through mental health episodes or have trauma, we can get to them before they commit a violent act. We've got to invest more than that. We have not done a good job with that. And I also think we need to do what we can to make sure police officers are able to live in the community. I think it helps when police officers are familiar with the community they serve. We used to see that a lot more back in the day and a lot less now. A lot of that's because it's so expensive in DC. Our essential workers, our first responders, teachers, nurses, all that really can't afford to live here. I know we'll be talking about housing too, but that's a big thing as well. And I also think a big thing for me is pushing for transparency. If we're going to invest a lot in the MPD, they have a very large budget. We should be able to access body camera footage. The Office of Police Complaints needs to be bolstered and supported. And we need to make sure that MPD, especially when there's a use of force or something like that against a civilian, that we get all the information we need to make sure if a police officer did something wrong, that they are held accountable.
Great, thank you. I think you made some great points. DC needs an overall wraparound approach in solving public safety issues. Your camera's off, by the way. Is that
really?
on purpose?
No. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't know how long that was.
It was on 30 seconds. I think you described, I'll start over. I think you described it perfectly that DC needs holistic and an effective overall approach to solving public safety issues in the district. I mean, we can't always be reactive. We have to be proactive. We have to make
Yes.
sure mental health is there. We have to make sure our kids get the resources they need, the programs are in place. We have to make sure the police department does get their support. We have to make sure that accountability and transparency is there. We have to build relationships. And one of the things leading into our second question is, I think was good, the leadway into is like small businesses. When we don't change the environment and invest in small businesses and we have vacant units, that kind of can enhance, or not enhance, but increase crime in the city. Ward 2 has
Yeah.
seen an increase in commercial vacancies in recent years. What policies would you pursue to strengthen small businesses, activate vacant storefronts, and support a vibrant local community economy?
Yes. And Ward 2 is our main business district. I mean, that is downtown. That's where restaurants, hotels, so where they exist. So if Ward 2 is suffering from vacancies and lack of leases in the commercial corridors, that's a huge problem for DC. And it's an emergency. We have to fix that. In fact, that's one of our biggest drivers of our local funding. That's how we can fund our $22 billion budget. A lot of it is our commercial real estate taxes, property taxes, of course, income taxes. But one thing, as far as commercial or the small businesses and supporting economic development, I think we need to expand things like the Neighborhood Prosperity Fund, which is supposed to help not just development projects, but also businesses that need a little bit of assistance. I think we need to invest in things like that. I also think we need to create new ways to provide gap financing for projects that will attract investment. I think that obviously the federal government has totally devastated the region. Trump has, and he's done it on purpose. We haven't really seen that. DC's used to federal overreach, but we're not used to a president that is actively trying to destroy the economy of the region. So we've got to use our local dollars as best we can to make up for some of the difference. I also think if there are certain bids, business improvement districts, I know there are several in Ward 2, we need to allocate grant funding for that, because that can help with some of the security concerns, cleanliness concerns that some may raise, and that can help make sure businesses are attracted to the area and stay in the area, and people come into the city to spend money at those businesses. And I know Ward 2 has some very strong bids already, but we want to make sure we keep it that way. And they're funded by property tax or by contributions from businesses in the bids. So if there are less businesses, there's less money for the bids. So local government may have to step in there. I also think we could probably do more to provide tax credits for small business owners. We have some, but we may need to expand it in some cases. And then also, and this is a big one, I think that a lot of people have been talking about, make it easier for people to renew their licenses, renew their permits, and not make it so they have to deal with so many different agencies and hear different things from different agencies. Board of Zoning, ABC Board, Department of Buildings, Department of Licensing. People get run around back and forth between different agencies all the time. It takes a year, 18 months, sometimes longer, just to get what should be a simple approval. And especially if somebody already has the approval and they're just trying to renew, it should be much easier than it is for a lot of businesses. So I support some of the discussion around creating a portal where businesses can log in and see the status of all of the different applications or forms or permit requirements that they're navigating at one time, so that they get the status right there and the government can see the same status. Part of the problem is that the agencies don't even talk to each other. So, we've got to do better with that. We have the technology to do it.
No, that's good. I appreciate that. And also, leading into our next question, to have a vibrant downtown, as the mayor would say, or a vibrant business district. One of the other main topics is transportation and mobility,
Mm-hmm.
which goes into
Yeah.
people getting to be able to shop or eat and support those businesses. So, what transportation and mobility policies would you prioritize to ensure Ward 2 is safe, accessible, and efficient for pedestrians, cyclists, transit riders, and also drivers?
Well, we've talked a lot about Vision Zero. I support Vision Zero. I think we all have to support the idea that we should have no traffic fatalities. That should be the goal. And we've spent, I believe, 400 million or so since Vision Zero, since the mayor started that program. But it has not really worked. I mean, fatalities have sort of been up and down, and they really went up a lot the last 2 years. And I think in 2025, though, they did drop a lot, which was encouraging, though I think they've spiked a little bit this year. So clearly, what we're doing is not really meeting the goal, although we've taken some strides in the right direction. One thing I think we definitely need, when we have bike lanes, they should be protected, in my opinion. Some may disagree. I think a bike, if we're going to put a bike lane on the street, it should be protected. But I also don't think they should be on every street. And in Ward 2, it's a bigger issue because things are more compact, it's denser, a lot of businesses. So it's a very polarizing topic in Ward 2. You all could tell me, you could tell me better than I can tell you, but from what I've heard. And one thing I would say is you've got to have balance. We cannot be pulled into an environment where we have a bike lane on every single street. And I personally don't think we need them on the main commercial corridors, because I think the removal of parking, I do believe it hurts some of the economic activity on that street. I know Connecticut Avenue, that was a big fight where there was a proposed bike lane there. Some of the business owners, some of the community were able to push it back. Now, some of that ran into Ward 3 as well. But I think that seems to be a big issue right now with the way we're designing the streets, and we've got to do it in a way that doesn't hurt the businesses. I mean, especially in Ward 2. I mean, if Ward 2 is not generating income for the city, we will not be able to fund the programs that we're used to. We just won't. That is our downtown. So I am concerned about that, and I want to make sure that DDOT. We've got to have stronger oversight of DDOT so that they just don't do what they want to do. I mean, it seems like they don't even follow their own rules and regulations sometimes when they either decide to redesign a street, or when they put down a bike lane, but then maybe remove it or change it, or they may propose to keep some parking, but then they end up removing it. I mean, we've got to make sure we're holding DDOT to following their own rules as they redesign these streetscapes.
My biggest headache as an ANC commissioner is with DDOT. They provide and present all these plans, these vibrant plans, and then once they're installed, it's like, oh, we don't have funding to upkeep it. We don't have funding to do this. And it's just like, why did you present this, and why did you waste taxpayer funds to install the water wells? Like, it's such an aggravating thing, and agencies don't talk to each other. Even
Yeah,
inside of DDOT, there's so many different departments that are just disconnected to
yeah.
what's going on, and it just makes the life of an everyday resident frustrating because we're the one dealing with these issues. And so, great segue into public spaces and the quality of life for residents. What steps
Mhm.
would you take to ensure Ward 2's public spaces, libraries, parks, community facilities are well maintained, welcoming, and actively used by residents and visitors?
Well, Ward 2, in my opinion, is an amazing ward that has a good collection of even though it's very dense, you've got several circles that have some green space in the middle. DuPont Circle, I know there's going to be that new deck over project that is underway. I know that was controversial, but it seemed like a lot of people are looking forward to that because it will provide more space where there's currently that sort of overpass. So I think anytime we can fund things like that, as long as the community supports it and has had their chance to give input, I think that's positive. And we've got to make sure we maintain the green space. I think that's a big thing for me too. DC does have a very nice network of parks. I believe we were ranked #1 recently by I forget the publication, but we do have a highly rated park system. And I want to maintain that. I don't want us to lose the green space we do have in Ward 2 in order to just develop more and more and just sort of cranes in the sky, so to speak. So we've got to have the balance. Now with the libraries and rec centers, I think the mayor has done a good job of modernizing a lot of our rec centers and libraries. I know in Ward 2, like the polling precinct right there on Peace Street, that rec center, I believe that was recently redone. I know people vote there. Chad, or Chad Park or something. Um,
Stead Park.
Yes, Stead
Yeah.
Park. That one, I believe, was modernized not too long ago. Now I know the West End Library, that one that people had wanted modernized for a while, and I believe that one has been completed, right?
I'm not sure. I don't know
Okay,
what I'm more so in Shaw what's
okay.
going on over there, but I do know that the Kennedy Rec Center got some upgrades.
Hmm.
And then the Shaw Library, Shaw Walter Daniels Library, is currently about to start their renovation as
Yeah,
well.
I think they closed
Yes.
last week or
Yeah.
Yeah, they
soon.
closed
Yeah.
recently. Yeah, so that's good. But again, well, not again, but one thing though, I think we've done a good job. I think the mayor did a good job of, like I said, renovating and upgrading facilities. But then if there's no programming, what's the point? I mean, a lot of these rec centers, that's a big concern that there's not enough programming in them. And they closed earlier. So we're trying to service the youth, service the community. We've got to extend some of the hours at
Yes.
some of these rec centers, especially the ones that I think are more heavily used. Maybe not every day. I'm not saying they're open every day until 10 or 11 p.m. But even if there are certain days where the hours are extended, I think that would be helpful. And we also, I think, need to invest in like cleanliness. I don't know if you have any questions about that, but the clean city in the last budget, the Office of the Clean City was basically absorbed by DPW, which I did not support. Or I mean, I was just a staffer, so I guess I should have support. I didn't have a vote, but I mean, as someone working on the budget, I didn't like that idea. I think we need to ramp up something within the mayor's office that has the ability to react quickly and say, hey, we got complaints about, Logan Circle. All right, go clean it up. Allocate the money. Bam. We don't have to go through the bureaucracy or the red tape. I think we could do better at keeping our streets and neighborhoods clean. Definitely. And of course, we got the problem with the rats and everything. So it all goes back to that. So I think we should upgrade our trash cans. I've been talking about that. I think the time has come to have the metal trash cans, the big belly ones with where you pull the handle down and put the trash in. I don't think we should have any more of the just open top, just try. I mean, at least make them work for it, the rats. I mean, so I think all that ties into sort of the use of public space and how people feel about being out and about in the neighborhoods.
Yeah, it just upgrades the quality of life. Like you
Yeah.
can tell the difference. Like when I walk in Foggy Bottom or Golden Triangle, and then when I get back home in Shaw, it's just like, what the hell? Like, we don't have, granted, we don't have a bid in Shaw. And but that also talks to the lack of funding for our main streets.
No,
They need
yes,
way more
yes,
funding than what they
yes,
have to be able to fully operate in their capacity. And so I think if we are unable to get businesses to agree to do the bids in every single neighborhood where businesses are, then we need to increase the funding for the main street so they can hire people to keep the communities clean and so that they're able to
yeah,
fully support the community because that you can see the disparity across even within the ward of
yes.
neighborhoods of the quality of life for residents. And so this goes to our fifth question is focus also, which is a huge concern that residents are facing, which is housing stability and people who are experiencing homelessness. What policies would you support to address unhoused residents in Ward 2 while ensuring residents have the access to housing, supportive services, and safer communities?
Owners. Well, this is probably the issue that people talk about the most on the campaign trail, affordability. And when you talk about affordability, the first thing is housing. That's really the thing that people spend most of their money on, even people who can afford it. Housing is the main bill in the household. And DC is a renters community. I think 60% of our households are renters. And I think almost 50% are spending half of their income now on rent. And that is a big issue. DC's done very well in the last couple decades, but it's also locked a lot of people out of the dream of owning a home or being able to stay in DC. So we have good programs in DC. I mean, I mentioned HPAP program earlier. I support inclusionary zoning, which reserves 10% of all new construction, the units in any new construction reserves them for those who I believe are 30% of AMI or something, or up to 50%. I think we need to increase inclusionary zoning maybe to 15% of units. I don't know if we could go much higher, but I think we should even do more in that space, and particularly for those who are seniors, because we're seeing people live longer. People who are living longer want to live, they want to age in place. They still want to be in the city in a lot of cases. So we have to continue to be mindful of that as our population continues to grow older. I also think we need to upzone certain major areas. Now, that would be a lot of Ward 2, which is downtown. And I think we should take advantage of the fact that Ward 2 already has some density. And in cases where we can build a couple extra floors, I believe we should do that, especially where Ward 2 already has, of course, we don't have skyscrapers, but Ward 2 has a lot of our taller buildings already. I think we should maximize how high we can build. We should really reduce the Height Act in some way, but of course, that's a congressional thing. Nothing the council really can do other than make a lot of noise and scream and yell about it. I also think we need to increase funding for permanent supportive housing vouchers, our local rent supplement program. We need to continue to do that as well, so that we're helping people who want to stay in DC and who are paying something, who are contributing to DC in some way. And we really have to do more to preserve the housing we have. I think that people, when they see a new building go up, especially if they live in a community for a long time, a building may be built 15 years ago. To someone who's been in the community for decades, that building's still new to them, or even 10 years old. They look at it like, oh, I remember what was there before. But after 10 years, things start to break down in a building. And I think a lot of buildings, sadly, that I've seen are breaking down after 2 or 3 years because they're built differently than they were back in the day, just cheaper materials. They're going up faster. So we have a problem where buildings that we look at as new or like they look good on the outside, they have a lot of problems on the inside. And we've got to invest more in preserving the housing that we have as much as possible.
I
And I
think it's
also,
also more to like better oversight and inspections because what
yeah,
developers are doing is they're just throwing up these buildings and they're just holding them for 2 to 5 years and selling them off. So they don't care
mhm,
about the quality, but at the end of the day, us taxpayers are the ones that's going to have to foot the bill, because of the quality of the building and the overall upkeep of the building is like we're going to be stuck with it, and or the building goes vacant or whatever the case may be. It's
yeah,
just like you made a good point of the quality of materials have gone down, granted inflation and that sort of thing, but it should not be at the expense of a resident.
right. Yes, totally agreed. And the thing is, one of the frustrating things for me is we have a bill that passed. It's a law, the Proactive Inspections Act, but DOB says, oh, well, we don't have enough inspectors and we can't afford it. And the fiscal impact statement that was submitted is like this exorbitant amount. And so it's never been implemented. So it's frustrating. We have a law on the books that we can't even get them to start, where they're supposed to inspect, I believe, every building every 2 years. 2 or 3 years, something like that. I mean, we need to make sure that goes into effect. And I think the next mayor, whoever it is, and the council, we're going to have to push the mayor to make that a priority, because you're right. If you do the proactive inspection, it can catch some things before they become huge problems. It's cheaper to fix, it's easier to fix. And we probably also need to make sure we're enforcing any penalties that or fines that are associated with developers or management companies that aren't making repairs that are flagged, because that's another thing. Even when they do get inspected, they may get a list of things they need to do, but then the fine maybe isn't assessed, or they get a slap on the wrist. We have to make it more, we need to make them feel it when they aren't doing aren't holding up their end of the bargain, which is making sure that the units are up to code, making sure that they're making repairs when they're supposed to. We've got to hold them to that.
No, for sure. I mean, that goes on
I,
well with accountability and just
Yeah.
ensuring that you're getting all of these tax rebates or not taxes at all, or not paying taxes at all. The least you can do is ensure that you're putting up a quality building.
Yeah.
And let's go.
sorry, Howard, before you segue over, I want to, and I don't usually do this, but I want to push back on this conversation a little bit as someone who's been a landlord in DC for the last 20 plus years of my life. And I've had to deal with really, and this could go to the accountability question, but the building inspectors are terrible, right? I mean, the way they treat landlords, the way that folks have been fined for knick-knack things. And I think one of DC's biggest problems is that we have an enforcement mentality here. We don't have a community mentality, right? I think we assume that every builder, every landlord is rich and or wants to get away with, some putting out some subpar product. And I'm not disregarding the 5 to 10% of that group that does that. But the other 90% of people are hardworking people that want to put out a good product and supply housing. And I think one of the big issues we have in DC is this overall mentality of treating everybody like they need to be enforced. I think we need to completely shift our mentality towards a more of a community focus. And that goes for policing, that goes for the way we do our programs and the way we enforce things, right? I mean, I think the building inspectors need to be more teachers to help make sure that a small mom and pop landlord who had maybe their first building knows what to do, right? And I think when we talked earlier about, Kevin, you talked earlier about making it easier for folks to thrive as a business. Hey,
But you're completely
inspector,
different from a large landlord like Gray Store.
yeah,
And like, I'm not
100%.
talking about mom and pop developers that own one, two, three, four
Yeah,
units.
yeah.
Like,
Okay,
I'm
good.
talking
Yeah.
about somebody who's down the street in Shaw about to build 200 plus unit apartment building. Like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
who I'm talking about, who's getting the DC taxpayer money to build these
Yeah,
buildings. Like,
Yeah.
these small ones,
exactly.
of course, like, there needs to be a
Yeah.
different way and a different approach for I agree, like let's like a own department on navigating how to do and work through these, these inspections and what needs to be done, like for small black owned businesses or developers. Like
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
agree with you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and sorry,
Yeah.
Kevin. Yeah, and I'll leave it at that. Maybe it's a good segue. I mean, I think too often we talk about a subject and we kind of loop everybody in, and like I don't think we should enforce the mom and pop the same way we enforce a big developer that has a hedge fund money from New York, right? I mean, I
Right.
think we need to figure out systems that help people thrive in DC, and it goes both ways. It's kind of, I guess, bottom up, that kind of mom and pop, but also like what can we do to help that big developer that wants to develop in DC? How can we help them thrive in a way that helps the community? Right? That's how I look at it. But there's a great segue, I think, to this, which I'll let Howard take. Unless you want to add something, Kevin, to this conversation.
Yeah, well, I would say I was thinking more of the big, and I didn't say it clearly, but I was thinking more of the larger developers that have these buildings where they do receive a lot of times some abatements or some tax credits to help incentivize the development. And then oftentimes, if the building falls into disrepair or if there are issues after several years, if they still even own the building five,
Yeah.
6 years later, oftentimes those repairs go unrepaired, and a lot of the tenants are now in conditions that are not are not suitable. So I really was focused on the larger developers. But to your point, even with them, and we talked about the one-stop shop for permitting, even for those large developers, it's often unclear of where to go and what they're supposed to do. And they hear one thing from DOB and another thing from Board of Zoning or whatever their issue they're dealing with. The government has to do a better job of communicating clearly with landlords, whether they own a 2 unit, 3 unit building or a 300 unit building. We've got to do a better job of communicating what the expectations are and what needs to be done in order for them to be in compliance. And we have done a horrible job at that.
Yeah. Now let's go into our next question. Thank you for that, which is kind of segue. We kind of been touched on in the last question, kind of combine the last two questions is how would
Okay.
you ensure that Ward Two's economic growth and development benefits longtime residents, workers, small businesses, and not just new investments? And what accountability measures would you put in place to ensure that happens?
Well, I think one thing we have to increase our investments in small businesses and entrepreneurs. I think we have an opportunity maybe to turn some lemons into lemonade with a lot of the vacancies downtown. I know we've talked about the conversion of commercial to residential. I know that there's the big one right there on Connecticut Avenue, the biggest one we've had where that I think it was Buca de Pepo or whatever. Buca de Bell. I used to like that restaurant. Now it's going to be, some residential there. But I think we've seen like the Roost over by Potomac Avenue. I don't know if I think you all probably
I
been
used
there
to
before.
manage that place.
Okay, yeah, so you know all
Yeah.
about it. That's kind of close to me. Or Sycamore and Oak. I mean, you know, which is in Ward 8, the old St.
Mhm.
Elizabeth's, or maybe in some of these vacant buildings downtown, we could do some of these pop-up, food hall type things where or little boutiques where small businesses can put up a shop and see how it goes. See if they can develop a base of clients, get some experience. And we've got the structures. The thing about Ward 2 is that there are a ton of buildings. There aren't many vacant lots like in other parts of the city. So while we're waiting to figure out what to do with some of these larger, square footages that are maybe vacant, I don't know, maybe we can push to do more of the model of these community structures that have multiple small businesses in them. Probably wouldn't work in every case, but it could be a way to not only put the space to use, but also give some small businesses, some people who otherwise may not get the opportunity to get their business or their products in front of the consumer, give them a chance to do that. And I think the residential to commercial, I'm sorry, the commercial to residential conversions, I think those are are good when they're feasible, but I don't think they're always as feasible as people think. And I know people talk about it a lot. Oh, we can just make these empty commercial units or commercial spaces into housing. It's not as easy as you think. There's certain requirements for housing units, like the windows and access to the stairs, stairwells, and things like that. And those commercial buildings that were developed to be offices, it requires a lot of money, in a lot of cases, to convert them to being up to code as residences.
Hell,
But
sometimes it's just easier just to tear it down.
right, and just build a new one. Exactly. Especially if there's issues already with the building, if it's an older building, yeah, they just tear it down. So, but I do think we got to be creative about using these vacant spaces, and I don't know, maybe some more of these sort of, I don't know what you call them, pop-ups, I know food halls,
Kind of
like
like Union Market.
yeah, like Union Market. So and those have been very successful when I mean, Union Market is now, I mean, packed. It's like
Yeah.
a spot. If you've got someone in town for a weekend or something, that's going to be high on the list, I think, for a lot of people. Like, we'll take them to Union Market. Um, Other than, of course, downtown. I mean, Ward 2 has all the spots anyway. You all are so fortunate in Ward 2. Everyone always is going to Ward 2 for things. But yeah. Now, as far as keeping, I think you asked also about making sure residents are not just the business owners, but also tenants. I mean, Ward 2 has also some of the higher rents in the city. And I think a few rent control buildings, but not, I don't know. I think a lot of them are not. A lot of the rent control buildings are further up, like Connecticut Avenue, Wisconsin Avenue. But we've got to make sure that, again, goes back to the inspections and make sure that the units are up to code and that tenants are not pushed out or sort of nudged out the door by the bad actors who are landlords. And I know they're not, most of them aren't. It's probably just, 5 to 10%, but 10% of bad actors in the housing space can really have negative impact on the community because people are very dependent on the landlord to be responsive and to do what they can to make sure the housing is suitable. So again, we just have to, it takes oversight and it takes being able to work with the mayor and making sure that the mayor has housing as a priority and making sure that we're organizing the community in a way that where the pressure is put on us, the council and the mayor. The council really needs to be the voice for the people and bring the concerns to the mayor and air it to the public. I think that's a big part of the job too, especially for an at-large member. It's important to have a sense of what's going on everywhere and to raise concerns. If Gray Star is not doing what they're supposed to do at a certain building or several buildings, we got to make that known. And I'm definitely prepared to do that and to work with people like you and other leaders in the community to do that.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. My
It's hard.
mother-in-law,
Oh, go
my
ahead.
mother-in-law has had so many issues with trying to rent her property. She ended up getting some with a voucher and just had like, yeah, every horror story you've ever heard, she went through. And part of it was with the inspections, right? It was things being held up because like a screw was loose. And like obviously you want a place to be inspected and you want to make sure that it's top notch, but someone wants to move into their house and if the screw is loose, they can live with the loose screw, right? We're not talking about like the plumbing doesn't work. We're not talking about like major
Yeah.
issues, right? We're talking about like the whole process got held up by that. And then once someone got in, then they were like and then one person got in wasn't a good tenant. And then they used like all these inspection things to come after her. And to be honest, her screw was loose. You know what I mean? But then she couldn't get in for the inspections. And I mean, this is just a small drop in the bucket of one person's experience, but when we start talking about
No,
like
but it's common. You hear about it a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
we're talking about how, and this is someone who raised her family in DC, has second houses in DC. She's getting close to retirement. This is her income, right? She wants to rent to someone on Section 8 because she wants to help out the community, right? Like my mother-in-law's biggest heart in the world. And then like all these things just make it so hard, And both of us grew up here. We just
Mhm.
know that like DC has
Yeah.
this way of like just beating down people to be like, just to throw their hands up in the air and say enough.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
enough is usually just like I'm leaving the city or I'm gonna stop doing this thing, which I think is just, you know, it's a tough job that you sign up to do because like there are kind of like structural issues that need to be repaired. We're
Mhm.
talking about big issues, but there's like we have a shaky foundation before we can even build on top of what we have.
Yeah. And there are enough major violations and large scale problems that should be the focus.
Yeah, yeah,
It's almost like we should be able to say, okay, well, okay, loose screw, just kind of, give them the chance to fix that, go ahead and notify the landlord, but it shouldn't hold up the entire process if it's a minor
yeah,
thing. And there's so
yeah,
many other bills. It's like, you know, your mom's story where she got inspected and had that finding that held up everything. Then there's a big building that may have 50 major violations that
yeah,
it takes
exactly.
6 months for them to even go to. I mean,
Yeah.
our priorities are off, it seems like too often. So yeah, feel
Um,
sorry that that happened, but
no, I mean, it's just someone, but like you said, it happens all the time, right? I have
yeah,
another
true.
friend who, and like the housing thing's a big discussion. And some folks will say, hey, we have plenty of housing, we just need to get folks in it, right? And the voucher system's too slow, or we have plenty of housing, it's not enough for family, right? Like the housing thing has so many levels to it. I just want to confirm the last question we asked was about accountability and results, correct? Okay.
Yes.
So the last question we have for you is regarding equity and inclusive growth.
Okay.
How will you ensure the policies that you support as a council member support the growth of DC, but also support longtime residents? How can you ensure that people benefit from investment in DC without displacing people who've been here for a long time?
Yeah.
Especially here
Well,
in Ward 2, as we develop downtown, as we try to build up neighborhoods.
mhm. Well, I think one, I would say we have a lot of areas in the city that have just not received the same level of investment. I grew up in Ward 7, when I still live in Ward 7, actually, not far from where I grew up. We're in Penn Branch now. And the Penn Branch Shopping Center, which I'm sure you've probably seen before, Penn Branch Shopping Center. Then there's Fairfax Village Shopping Center, a little bit further up Pennsylvania Avenue. It looks exactly the same as it did when my mom was little.
Okay.
So it's been the
Yeah.
same for 70 years. And this is in a community that has disposable income. I mean, there have been a lot of middle class, upper middle class, usually black families. At one point, there was mostly white families or families of European descent. Then it started to change, around the 60s and things. But these are people that were doctors, dentists, lawyers, firefighters, had what we would call good jobs. But for some reason, we don't get the same development. So we've got to use the same tactics that have worked in other areas, like some of the tax increment financing. I would support that in areas where we're desperate for growth and for development. As far as Ward 2, I think the big thing is we've got to figure out a way to keep the cost of living down in order to make sure we're not displacing people. We have to make it easier for people to lower the cost of living. Maybe it's incentivizing the use of more co-ops. Maybe where it where it can be done, even though I'm kind of mixed on it, but like the land trusts, where it makes sense. using that to make sure that prices stay low. I don't know if that makes sense in a lot of spots in Ward
Yeah.
2. I think that Ward 2 is unique because it is our downtown district, and it's going to be tough to make it super affordable when you're living right by K Street and you're close to the White House and you're close to all the hotels. I mean, you're right in the middle of things. It's like Times Square in New York, or
Yeah.
something. So we have to be realistic too. Not every part of the city is going to be super affordable. It's just not, and there are limits on what we can do. But I think that I think we've got to do more for the people who are doing what we ask them to do, the people who are fighting to contribute. I mean, if there's somebody who is working, they're making decent money, maybe they have they're married, they have a child. We've got to find ways to create programs and resources for them. We do a lot for people who have very little. We have an incredible safety net, by far the best in the region and among the best in the country, if not the best. People know you can come to DC and you can get a room. If you're homeless, you can get a unit, you can get food from places. You will be able to get by for a while. Way better than in Fairfax County or in Richmond, or something. But we don't do enough for the people in the middle, the people who are working. It's almost like we assume, well, they've got a job, they're doing okay. They make $70,000 a year, they should be able to make it. Well, no, times have changed. And I think we've got to start talking more about the middle class. It's a national problem too, but even in DC, we have to remember that it's not just those among us who have the least. We've got to make sure we're doing some for people who are working hard. And I'm not saying people who have the least aren't working hard, but the people in the middle who really are doing what we ask them to do,
Yeah.
so we got to do that.
And I think that's a great insight. And I think you're probably the first candidates I've heard kind of talk about the middle class, at least in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally agree. I think one of my favorite words in the campaign season is affordability, because it's a
Mm-hmm.
word that means different. It means something to everybody, right? Doesn't matter where you are in the income spectrum, like you have an affordability issue right now, right? And I think the middle class is probably hit the most with it because affordability means so much, right? Because as you said, there's not as many programs to support the middle class. There's also an assumption that if you have two breadwinners in a house in DC, you can afford certain things. And that drives down the affordability, at least for me, for a bit folks in the middle class. I'll speak to myself, for example, where, trying to raise two kids in DC, right? School ends at 3. There's no guaranteed after school program, right? To get paid for
Right.
that, or someone has to go
Yeah.
pick the kids up, right? Right. So it starts there. If you want to get, your
Yeah.
kid needs some extra tutoring time for reading or writing or whatever, like, there's no programs to support that, right? In DC, at least for the middle class. So then you have to pay for that, right? You
Mm-hmm.
talk about earlier parks and rec programs, library programs, they aren't really available or non-existent. So if I want my kid to play baseball or soccer, I got to pay for that out of pocket, right? You start adding all these things up, it ends up being really expensive and really unaffordable to live in the
Yeah.
city and raise a family, right? And now I'm not even talking about the housing, the other big bill things. So, um,
Yeah.
so thank you
Yeah.
for speaking to that. I like to ask people all the time, and parents I talk to, like, does DC make it easy for you to raise your family here? And the answer is never yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
No, it does not.
Right, and until the answer is yes, that something's not right. And we've talked a lot about that. I mean, if you ask a small business person, does DC make it easy for you to run your business here?
Yeah, they're
Until
gonna
the
say
answer
no.
is yes, right? And to me, that should be the bar, and that should be the bar that every candidate has. Every Democrat in DC should have the goal, I think, of making DC, the shining light of what a democratically run city
Mm-hmm.
can look like, right?
Yeah.
Um, so with that being said, that's all. Thank you for indulging me again.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, you're right. We are aligned on that. I mean, That I like the way you put it. I mean, until we can say that, yes, we make it easy or at least workable,
Yeah.
and we are not there for families
Yeah.
or businesses.
So as we wrap up, I'll give you kind of a chance to say goodbye,
Okay.
wrap up for Ward 2. So thank you very much again, Kevin, for sitting down with us. Thanks for running for City Council at large. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us today. Before we wrap up, is there anything you want to say in closing to Ward 2 voters
Yes.
as
Well,
we
thank you
approach
to
Election Day?
you. Yeah, thank you to Ward 2. And I have to say, I'm glad to see Ward 2 Democrats involved in this way. Ward 2 Democrats, it's one of our smaller wards for as far as population, Ward 2. And we need to make sure they know we've got strong Democrats in Ward 2 as well, and an active Ward 2 Dem organization. So I'm very happy to see you. Congratulations on your new role on the board, and to
Thank you very
Howard as
much.
well. And yeah, look forward to working with you all, and to the voters, those out there who are watching and who will be viewing this. I'm Kevin Chavous. I am a Democrat. I mean, I'm also proud to be the national committee man. So I'm on the DNC. So if you're a Democrat, I was on the ballot in 2022, and I represent us on the DNC. So I've been proud to do that and to support our efforts for statehood nationally and to support the national party. So I'm not new to DC. I'm not new to our concerns or the neighborhoods, the community. And I'm looking forward to continuing my service to the city on the city council. I'm number 8 on the ballot, and I'm humbly asking you to rank me first as we go into this election. Our first was ranked choice voting. So please rank me first. And even if I'm not your first ranking, save one of your top rankings for me and just make sure you vote. Make sure you get out and vote. Encourage everyone in your neighborhood and in your family, if they're in DC, to vote as well. This is not the time to check out. I've been very disappointed when I've gone around and people say, oh, I'm not voting this time. All the politicians are the same, or they're not standing up to Trump, all of that. Well, this is the time really to vote. So we can't check out now. And make sure you're listening to me, listening to all the candidates, because we want to be engaged before people get into office. So again, I'm Kevin Chavous, and I'm number 8 on the ballot in June, and I hope to earn your support.
Great. Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate you again
All
taking the
right.
time with us.
Thank you.